Good morning or good afternoon and good autumn to you. I'm Madge Strong. I'm the mayor of Willits this year, and this will be my third and last report of 2021 as mayor. And I just like to keep our community aware of what's happening with the City of Willits. This morning, as I was sort of preparing what I was going to say, I heard the street sweeper go by my house, and I just realized that along with all these other things that I'm going to be reporting, that there's all sorts of things that are required and that our city staff take care of just to keep the very basic things going in the city. And we have a really small staff, and they're very dedicated, and things like doing the street sweeping and fixing potholes and getting the water to your faucets is stuff that just goes on 24/7. And I just want to appreciate the hard work that our city staff does. So with that said, if you see workmen out doing stuff like that, tell them thank you. So one of the things that we just did at our November 10th, the City Council adopted the 2021-2022 fiscal year budget. And we were several months late getting that budget done, but it is the blueprint for what we do and how we spend our money over the entire fiscal year from the end of June or the beginning of July to the end of June. When you look at all of the funds combined, the budget is just a little under $20 million, which is a lot of money. Most of that money is spent on the enterprise funds, which is providing the water system and the wastewater treatment, and those are funded through user fees. So the part that is what we call the general fund, that works for the police, parks, public works, administration, finance, all of those other functions that the city does. And that's the one where we completely rely on taxes and other small funds that enable us to do the general fund. That part of our budget is $6.7 million, and we are this year looking good. We have had more revenue than we anticipated, and our costs are well covered by the revenue that we're collecting this fiscal year, and that's going to enable us to start paying back some of the funds that we took out of reserves in previous years. And all of that is thanks to Measure K that was passed a year ago. The budget also includes capital improvement programs, which are things that we budget over a several year period, things that are not your day-to-day operations, but your extra projects. And one of the things that we're going to be doing this coming year with capital improvements funding is the land use and zoning elements of our general plan. And this is a very critical thing to update because, for one thing, it's terribly out of date at the moment. And in order to progress on things like providing more housing in our community, we need to have those general plan documents and the zoning updated. This was one of the priorities. In fact, I think it was the highest priority that we identified earlier this year. The capital improvements projects, and by the way, a lot of the funds for that particular project, the general fund, are being reimbursed by grants. So that's a good plus for us. One of the other smaller projects in capital improvements is going to be a slight remodel of the City Hall public area. And that was something I thought at my last report back in June was going to be done within a month or two. We postponed it so that it could be looked at in the context of all the other projects that we're trying to do and make sure that we had enough revenue to cover our expenses. So basically, the budget and our finances are looking pretty darn good, and we're happy to say that. The budget, by the way, is actually very, very conservatively estimated. We assume that revenues will not be wildly higher than they have been in the past. And we've also assumed that all of the staffing would be fully funded for the whole year. And unfortunately, however, we do have quite a few vacancies in our staff right now. So I'd like to point out that we are budgeting in raises for all of our staff. We did a compensation study last spring, so 7 or 8 months ago, where we discovered that we are really behind the curve of similar-sized communities in our region. So with that in mind, we had really tightened our belt in years past, and we had never really kept up with what's the going rate to pay people as qualified and as hardworking as our staff are. And so we are giving raises this year and budgeting in for the following 2 years. Some raises that should make us more competitive with surrounding communities. And the idea there is not only to retain the staff that we already have, which is terribly important, but also when we do have a vacancy to be able to recruit and not have people just sort of laugh and say, hey, I can go to work somewhere else for more money. So we're keeping up, and that's a good thing. By the way, in terms of vacancies, if anyone is interested, we do have an assistant planner position, a grants coordinator, and an administrative assistant positions that are available. And if you're interested, you could contact our Human Resources Department at the city. That I can give you the phone number. It's 459-7176. Of course, you have to do 707 first. We did, I'm very happy to report, we did fill the finance director position. And one of the reasons that our budget was adopted late was that we've been having to just rely on a part-time finance director who's a consultant. He's great, but he isn't available full-time. So we have somebody coming on board in December, and that's going to really help us continue to have our finances in order, audit past years and so forth. Oh, I did want to mention that in addition to the general fund, which is looking very good right now, we have the enterprise funds, and those are the funds that are paid for out of user fees or user taxes, specifically earmarked only for those funds. And the big ones are water and wastewater treatment. Both of those, we are going to be doing rate studies in the coming year in 2022 so that we can do long-term, making sure that the rates that we're charging are sufficient to keep those funds adequately funded for the long haul. The third enterprise fund is the airport fund. We've done an awful lot of work at the airport this last year, and we will do a little bit more this coming year. And most of that has been paid for, reimbursed through the FAA and other grant funds, which is great. And of course, the people that use the airport pay their fees, and that keeps that fund basically balanced. Okay, so that's a lot about the budget and about kind of the administrative end of things at the city. I just wanted to also mention that Brian Bender is our new city manager as of January of 2021, so he's been city manager now for less than a year. He's been doing a really good job of reviewing all of our departments and managerial staffing to make us as efficient as we can be within our limited budget and our really pretty small staff compared to other cities of our size. And by the way, I think that's enough of that. One of the important departments that I am particularly interested in, because I used to be a land use planner myself, is our community development department. And I think they are doing an awful lot of work. We do need to fill a couple of vacancies there. Housing has been one of the big needs that we have in our city. As anybody who's looking to bring friends or relatives to come and live here or to work here knows that that's one of the obstacles we face. So there is a new subdivision that's being constructed right now off of Bechtel Road near the Shell Lane where that goes off. I think the initial construction right now is 3 sort of model homes. There's going to be a total of 8 single-family homes, and then there's going to be 4 fourplexes. So that's 16 more multiple housing units. which is going to help fill the need. But in the long run, what we're also looking at is that land use planning that we talked about with the general plan and zoning. And that ultimately, we're looking at the possibility of annexing some land from the county into the city limits so that we can serve that area and develop it more appropriately with housing that has public services built into it. And that would be out in that area the southwest edge of the city. That's one of the high priorities that we're going to be getting to starting this year. It's going to be several years before it gets actually underway. Another aspect in the Community Development Department is they've been working with the California Conservation Corps, which has now an approved campus basically across the street from the new hospital. And ultimately, construction hasn't started yet, but they are expecting it to start this coming year. And it will eventually house approximately 120 trainees who work around the whole Northern California on the Conservation Corps projects, which include a lot of environmental restoration, trails, and forest management, and so forth. So it's a wonderful project, and those trainees, as well as the full-time administrative staff and the teaching staff of the Conservation Corps, will be housed right there in Willits, and that'll be a real boost to our community. So that's an exciting new development. I think the completion is expected in fall of 2024. Another thing that the Community Development Department wants everybody to know about, if you're a business owner in town, is that we have CDBG funds available. That's Community Development Block Grant funds from the feds, that we have over $500,000 available to loan to businesses for basically almost any kind of improvement that includes payroll, inventory, site improvements, equipment, and really an important benefit is that these loans can be forgivable if more than half of the employees that are retained or brought in under the loan are for low and moderate income people, then you don't ever have to repay that loan. So it's a wonderful opportunity, and if any business owners out there are interested, please contact our Community Development Department and ask for information about the CDGB loans. Another thing that that department is also working on is the vacant commercial building ordinance that was adopted several years ago. They've now done an inventory of which buildings are being left vacant for a long period of time. And the idea of this is that the owners of those buildings need to be making really good faith effort to keep their building upgraded and essentially ready to rent or sell, not just sort of boarding up the windows and having it sit vacant. Provided that they're doing their job to do that, all they really have to do is register that they have that building, and the Community Development Department will be helping try to find renters or buyers for our vacant properties. So that's a step forward. All of us know that we have some kind of long-term vacancies that are not doing our community much good. They're eyesores. So I'm happy to have that happening. And the department is also working on the Rails with Trails program, which will eventually hook up with the entire Great Redwood Trail system that will go from the Bay Area all the way to the border of, I think, Oregon, up to Humboldt Bay anyway. Not the border, but to Humboldt Bay. And our segment right here in town is essentially underway. They're doing environmental studies. Once that's done, then they can start doing actual construction of the trail that will go basically along from the hospital up to the city limits at the north end, and it'll run along the railroad tracks, but it will not supplant the railroad. So in case we are using the railroads for railroads. I believe that's the Community Development Department report. A next item that I think is of interest to everybody in our community and also in our state really is water. We have the benefit of our two reservoirs that are in basically a pristine watershed. So our reservoirs are a wonderful source for the water supply for our city. And they have been keeping up with the demand for water despite 2 years of very low rainfall. So this year, for example, well, the last 2 years, the reservoirs were full at the end of the rainy season, and that was with only 25 inches of rain each of those years. And that's less than half of the average rainfall that historically. Of course, now we don't know if there's going to always be even half of the historic rainfall, but that's very good news so that we can fill up those reservoirs, and they, this year, for example, lasted us all through the entire high peak season. We did ask for voluntary conservation towards the end of summer, but we were in good shape. Meanwhile, oh, and by the way, I have just a little bit of statistics that our water department put together for us that we have been using. In 2019, we used 818 acre-feet of water. In 2020, we used 718, so 100 acre-feet less water in 2020. And then in 2021, we are almost 100 acre-feet less than that. But that was up to date a few weeks ago. So we are keeping our water usage very reasonable, and that's partly due to the efforts of our customers and water users in the city. The pandemic may have had some effect on it because some of the institutional users of water, including schools, for example, were closed. So there's some other factors, but another factor is that we've been plugging leaks. When you have the water distribution system with old pipes, in many cases, we have areas that we've had basically repeated leaks and having to go in and try to keep fixing those. So our engineering department identifies those kinds of areas and goes in and over the course of several years has been making a lot of improvements. The other thing that we did back in 2014, when we did have actually a really severe drought year and the rains didn't come, we approved the Elias well, which is north of the water treatment plant, at the north end of town. We approved that being developed as a supplemental source for drinking water for the city. And that system is now in place. We didn't need to use it at all in 2020. And we just began to use it a little tiny bit after the rains started this year in the fall. So the reason it was really helpful this year after the rain was that we had such violent storms back there a few weeks ago that the reservoir water got very turbid, got a lot of mud kind of mixed in with it, and it was much harder to treat. So the Elias well was able to be used to supplement and have less treatment problems for the water for a couple of weeks this year. But that reservoir that groundwater well is actually very good quality water, and so we're really happy to have it as a backup system when needed. The city had been proposing a second drinking water groundwater well, and that was called the Long 20 well, and it basically is on the same pipeline from the Elias well to the little treatment plant that's at the sewage treatment plant area of the city. That Long 20 well does not have as good a water quality. It includes several contaminants, among which is arsenic. And we, when the city prepared the environmental review documents for that, and we scheduled it for the city council, there was a lot of public comment and concern about using water that was contaminated with arsenic, and there were several concerns about how much groundwater do we want to rely on? Will that affect the hydrology and the availability of water to other users in the valley? So it was pulled off of the city council agenda just at our November meeting, and the city is now looking at scaling way back and not developing that long 20 well for drinking water purposes, and instead just doing some improvements to the clear well, or clear water tank that is part of the treatment of the Elias well water. So anyway, that I think was a relief to a lot of people in the community, that project was just pulled back. There is another groundwater well in the city, and that is the Park well. It is not for drinking water. It's not mixed in with the city's water at all, but it is used for irrigation and sometimes for construction projects to, get the dust down and things like that, or to mix concrete, things like that. That well is still in use, and the city uses it for irrigation, and we also sell water to water trucks. In the past year, that sale of water from those non-potable water has been over $190,000. That money, the funds from that, are earmarked for recreational purposes, and this year that is paying for the new lighting at the tennis courts. So that's another source of water. If the city ever decided that they absolutely had to use that water, it could potentially be looked at and treated at that same treatment plant with the Elias well. But again, it is contaminated water, and so it is definitely not a desirable solution. So at this point, it's not in the system at all, and there's no immediate plans for that to happen. But I think water's a topic that everybody is very concerned about. Earlier this year, or kind of late summer, there was the whole kerfuffle, I guess, around water being needed on the coast, where they were really, really running out of water before the rains happened. And there was a period of several weeks where water ended up being trucked from Ukiah to Fort Bragg, and then from Fort Bragg treated and then sent out to in trucks to places like the Mendocino Village. Willits was not being we were asked at Willits whether we would be available to potentially provide water, and we were not in a position to do that, and so that was not on the table. So I think I'm going to end with a little bit of news about the City Council itself. Back in June, when I did my last mayor's report, we were hoping that we were going to start having our City Council meetings in person at City Hall, and we were just on the verge of doing that when, of course, the surge in COVID cases started happening with the variant, and so we decided that was not probably a really great idea to have public gatherings, even if we were all masked. So we've been continuing, with the exception of a couple of workshop sessions that we did have in person. We've been meeting through telephonically, online, and by phone. So I just want people to know that even though we're not in person at City Hall, you can attend our meetings. All you need to do is contact our city clerk, Kathy Moorhead, and her number is 459-7121, and get notified of the agendas and what the call-in information is. So we encourage people to continue to follow what we do at City Hall. The coming meeting is going to be December 8th. It's usually the second and fourth Wednesdays of each month. In November and December, we're just doing only the second Wednesday each month. So December 8th is our next meeting, at which time we will be doing several things. One is selecting the mayor for 2022. It will not be me. We're going on to a rotation system for the mayorship. So the likelihood is it will be Sabrina Rodriguez this year. And the idea of this rotation is to sort of spread it around and have other city council members take their turn as mayor, to the extent that they're willing to do that. And I think it's a good idea to keep more people involved in that leadership role. doesn't really involve any extra power or authority, but it does meet it's sort of a title. Oh, the other things coming up at the December 8th meeting that you might be interested in, one is the Urban Forestry Management Plan, which we completed, or the draft is completed and it's being reviewed, and that will come up for adoption on December 8th. One of the concerns will be long-term, making sure that we take care of the trees that we are now planting. And that includes trees on private property, but most of it is focused on city property. I'm just going to go ahead while Andy answers the door. The other thing coming up on December 8th is a proposal to put an art project in the Highway 20 park area along Highway 20. It's been proposed for a kind of a pinwheel artwork. So people that are interested in that should come on December 8th. Looking ahead into 2022, I just want to mention that we will have in that year, in November, will be the election of 2 city council seats. The 2 whose terms end is Greta Connie and Larry Stransky. If people are interested in getting more involved in city government and have ideas about policy direction and would like to consider running for city council, you need to make that decision before the beginning of August. That's when the filing deadline is for that election. I encourage people to do that. If you have any questions of me, feel free to call me. I'll give you my home phone number, 459-1493, or of course call the city and you can talk to the city manager or the city clerk or some of the departments that I've mentioned if you're interested in any of those vacancy positions. And again, show your appreciation. We have a really wonderful city, and it's made possible by very dedicated staff who work for all of us. So thank you very much.